It's very hard to follow Linda Rottenberg. It's extremely hard to follow Linda Rottenberg, I imagine. But we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of these topics here. And I'm joined by four incredible entrepreneurs, investors, somebody who runs an accelerator, incubator program in Brazil. And we're going to have a little bit of a different introduction for this panel than we would have had for other panels. So we have Sebastian Gomez here from Reservamos. And we have João Ricardo Mendes from Hotel Urbano. And then we have Flavio Pripas from Cubo. And Heberto Taracena from Invent Capital. So instead of me telling you what they're doing, I'm going to ask each one of them as if I were Mark Cuban, which, you know, all the similarities that you can see here. We're both from Pittsburgh, and that's where the similarities end. I'm going to ask them to take 1 minute and pitch to me if I were investing in their business, or if I were investing in their fund, or funding their incubator, what would you tell me? And I'm going to tell you at the end whether or not I'm going to invest. So, why don't we start with Sebastian, because he's had the most preparation for this.
Good. So I'm Sebastian Gomez. Great to meet you all. I'm co-founder of Reservamos.mx, and we are an online booking engine for multimodal travel. So what we do is, in one search, we're going to give you the best option for your travel, for intercity travel, whether that is going to be on air, or on bus, or on ride sharing. We're right now based in Mexico City, definitely thinking of this as a global business. We have coverage on over 90,000 routes and 3,500 destinations, both in Mexico and the US. And that's us.
Okay, all right. So, João, you're up.
I'm João Ricardo. I'm the founder of Hotel Urbano. We are a leading online travel agency in Brazil with 100% focus in hotels. Our market is very similar than Europe, a little bit different than US, out of which 85% of the hotels in Brazil are independent hotels, and here 85% is like owned by chains. So besides technology, one of our main challenges is like go to the long tail and reach a big part of these hotels in Brazil. And we started the company like in 2011. I started 2 internet companies before that, and so far so good. We are growing very well.
So Flavio, I'm a young Mark Cuban. Why should I participate in your program?
Okay, so my name is Flavio Pripas. I'm the managing director of Cubo. Cubo is a not-for-profit to foster entrepreneurship in Brazil. It's a place that the founders of Cubo are Itaú Bank, and Cubo is also supported by 11 big companies. And we are a place to connect people. We have more than 600 people coming to Cubo every day just to talk about entrepreneurship, new business models, new ways of working, new ways of thinking. And if you are a startup, you can come to Cubo that we can help you go to the market. We can help you grow. If you are a big company, you can come to Cubo so we can help you connect with interesting companies, and we can help you see what is happening in terms of innovation in Brazil. So this is what we do.
Thank you. And last but not least, Heberto, why should I invest in the fund?
I have to answer very honestly. I mean, when you said about just to follow up on your idea, the first thing that came to my mind was no mames, that you probably know what it means in Spanish. So what I'm going to tell you is it's a very honest fund, as you can say. So what I have it in my mind, I'm going to say it to you. So no mames, and I'm a former entrepreneur. I have launched 2 companies. I've sold both companies to larger companies, media companies, and now investing in new entrepreneurs. We have invested in more than 16 companies, giving in following rounds to almost 5 of those. Our average ticket is $500,000, and we expect to launch our next fund in the next 2 years.
And you were an entrepreneur before that, right?
Yeah. So I launched, as I was saying, my first company was a real estate portal. From those days in which people used to launch portals, it was a real estate portal. And we sold our first company to Time Inc. in year 2007. Then I launched an online media company, sort of a box media company here in the States. That will be the analogy. And we sold that company to Grupo Imagen, which is now one of the probably the third largest media company groups in Mexico.
Great. They taught me to say no manches instead of no mames. They said it was nicer.
That would be more politically correct.
Okay. And I'm not Mark Cuban. I'm James Stranko, and I'm at McKinsey, and you've probably heard of that before. I wanted to kick off the panel with a question that follows on from something that Linda discussed. It's interesting. She brought up the idea that entrepreneurs are not necessarily great risk takers; they're risk minimizers. Do you consider yourselves to be individually risk takers? That's a question for everybody. I don't know who wants to jump in.
Just to give you an answer, for the last 2 or 3 nights I've been reading a book called Anti-Fragile. So, I mean, we are not pro-risk itself. I mean, we know we have to take risks. But I mean, the whole idea of creating a new company is just to create something really anti-fragile in terms of being prepared for volatility, randomness, even dishonesty. So we have to take risks, but I think a great company is that company in which somehow develops an environment through its mission, through the structure, through people in which we minimize the risk in order to get stronger every time that we face those risks.
Sebastian, Flavio, it looks like you want to respond?
Yeah, I have been entrepreneur since 2008. I founded 2 companies, I also sold both. And we are risk takers, but I like very much the concept, the effectuation kind of concept. That you take some risk, but you know how far you can go to prove that what you're doing can be successful or not. So the first thing as entrepreneurs, what we do, and this is something that we share with people that inside Cubo, is that you need to look at the mirror and say to yourself how much you want to risk to make your point. Otherwise, you can go to places where you don't want to be.
One of the things that's interesting I noticed about the resumes of everybody on the panel today is that I think except for João, you all had worked either at consulting companies before or at larger organizations. And João, I believe you went straight out of school to become an entrepreneur. You left school to become an entrepreneur. I think for the audience here today, what drove you? What was the point for the folks that had worked in more traditional paths before to say, I want to make this jump and I want to make this change? And then João, it'd be interesting to hear from you, why you decided early on and what made you decide early on just to make the jump. So I don't know if you want to start, João.
Sure. I was in law school, and I was a government law school, and 80% of the smartest guys that study with me, they wanted to have a kind of a safe job and work for the government in Brazil, like be a judge or a prosecutor, those kind of jobs that you just pass in on the concourse and you have your whole life having the same salary. And that was the smartest guys in the room. And I was kind of haven't agree with that. And for my lucky, the school got in strikes. And then I go to spend 6 months in London, where I meet some guys from the finance sector, and they cover internet. And by that time, internet was very early stage in Brazil. When I back to Brazil, was a kind of I will not back to the school. I will start my internet company. So my brother was also in school, and he has but it wasn't a public school. Was a private university, kind of very expensive, and he worked part-time to pay the university. And I tried to convince him to come and work with me on this new enterprise, and he's more conservative. And I make a call to the company that he worked, make a very big claim about him, and he got fired, and he come to work with me. And that was by 2006. That was 5 years actually before we started Urbano. So since then we're together.
What sort of obstacles did you have to overcome in your family? Did they call you crazy? And Linda said obviously that crazy is a compliment.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I will have support from our mom. My father passed away when we were very young, and Actually, my professors from the university, they got me crazy. They asked me, "You gonna work with internet?" And I tried to explain for them, like by 2004, what's internet, how we make money with that. And most of them, some of them, I still friend of, and most of them think that I was crazy because it was a very good university, like, and I could be a judge or a prosecutor.
Sebastian, do you want to follow?
Yeah, and in my case, probably many of you can relate because I finished my MBA in 2013. I was at MIT, and it was really there where I had the opportunity to mingle with people and kind of get inspired of launching a business. That's where I met Andres, who is my co-founder today. We came from finance and consulting. We moved to Mexico during the summer of our internship together to work for Rocket Internet for a summer, and it was then when we were starting to learn more about e-commerce, more about internet, and we decided, okay, why don't we start to look for something out of ourselves? Our first idea was to build a guild group type of business, and really it didn't go too far. I remember we met with an investor from Colombia, and the woman said, "Who of you is the fashion addict?" And we were both like, "What?" Yeah, you hit it spot on, no? Definitely not. So then we came back to MIT, and really what we realized during our time in Mexico is that the main method of transportation, which in that case in Mexico and in all over South America is the bus, did not have online booking technologies, and this was our thesis. And to your question on the risk, like we really believed in the business. We really believed that we could have an impact. So it is also related. Like it was a controlled risk in what we were getting into, and we built our business plan during the MBA. And as soon as we were done, we moved to Mexico to start the company.
Do you want to follow?
Yeah, it's, just to follow on. I mean, I studied a master in public policy, so I wasn't supposed to be an entrepreneur, no. And when I work in McKinsey because no one is perfect, no. And
I have a master in public policy too. Maybe there's a trend.
And I learned a lot in McKinsey, definitely. But when I saw the opportunity to become part of this new project, Metros Cúbicos, that was the name of the first company, I had to confront my family, no, because they had some expectations about me. So, and I had to break those expectations, and the way I had to convince them was through the opportunity that they didn't have any clue that what it was about. I mean, it was year 2000, so if you explain internet in Mexico to your parents in year 2000, that was like explaining black magic, something like that. No? And so that was probably the first kind of entrepreneur that I was, an opportunity-driven entrepreneur. So I sold my company, it went quite well, but in year 2010, in which I launched my second company, I was a different kind of entrepreneur. I was pretty much convinced that it was a profession, not only an opportunity. So my second business was a mission-driven entrepreneur. So I wanted to change the life of entrepreneurs in Mexico, of media entrepreneurs in Mexico. That was my mission, my personal mission that I made a company mission. So, and that's the way I transformed myself during that whole process.
Flavio, do you have anything to add from your story?
No, it's interesting that for my mom, I was unemployed since 2008. So, and when I was invited to lead Cubo, then the first thing that she said was, "Hey, congratulations, you got a job." So, despite the fact that I sold 2 companies, okay, and I have a family and I have everything in place, but it's just, and for my father, it was different. My father was an entrepreneur. And it was very difficult for him to be an entrepreneur in Brazil. That's why for my mom to have a job was the best thing for her children to do, because they could have something a company to take care of them the way that she thinks. But that's it. It was interesting.
Which is really weird. I mean, because within your family you learn grit and to delay gratification within your family. That are the basis of entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
So, and it's quite contradictory, but anyway.
But then you also learn your parents don't want you to fail, right?
Yeah.
And that's parents don't want their
Sponsoring your kids.
right.
Don't
And
do that.
and so that brings us to failure. And everybody likes to talk about failure, and I think that everybody's failed, and people who haven't have just failed to tell you that they have. When have you failed, and what have you learned from it? I'm not looking at anyone particularly, but I'm gonna go down at the end. Sebastian, if you.
No, so on failure, I think it's something that will happen to you all along throughout the when you're launching the business and when you start creating the business. But I think the most important part there is to just sit back 1 second and understand and go to the roots of why you have failed, and then make sure that you don't repeat it and that you take it as a learning. And in our case, I think I could share many stories, and perhaps I would need one drink or two to share the full story of some of them. But one of the most memorable I remember was in 2014. We had done everything by the textbook. Many of you in your early stage ventures classes, they tell you go prepare to get funding with time, because it takes 6 to 8 months, and we did the same. We started speaking to all the VCs in Mexico, and finally by fall 2014 we signed a term sheet. We continued to invest. We even accelerated the investment to generate more growth. And then by December, the investor came to meet us, and he said, guys, because of external factors of my fund, I'm not going to be able to invest. And by that time, we had almost 1 month in cash. And we're like, whoa. And you know how this works in Latin America, that by December timeframe, which everybody's on holiday. And I think something that worked for us is that we had kept really close contact with the people that had believed in our company. And we were able to get a quick round that extended our runway. And it's one of those types of challenges that you face, that you need to just sit back, understand really what's going on, design a strategy, and then go immediately and act on it and execute.
João?
Yeah, I think we do have a lot of failures, maybe every day. Entrepreneurship wasn't a straight line. But one big one that I can share was a recent one. We suffer a hostile takeover from our co-controller, and we spent. People say, you guys are out of the company for 1 year. So, it was 296 days, because I count every single day was kind of a big, a big fight. Societary fight, and we got that point because we got a co-controller that had 40% of the company close to us, and we got back to the control of the company by September. And I think a lot why that's happened, and I think our failure was that we are on the middle of the storm, raising, we raised almost $150 million US in 5 years. That allowed other investor to have the co-control of the company. And I think our big failure was think that we were a big corporation and forget that we are a startup. So when you think that you are a big corporation, you think a lot of core values. When you think that you are a big corporation, you don't spend night working, and your team don't do that anymore. Again, you don't count cents. You don't turn off the light when you go out of the office. And you hire too fast. And when you hire too fast, we hired 700 people in 2 years. You can't hire 700 people that fast and just bring A players, just bring good people, and just bring people that share your vision and share your mission. So that was a big failure. I think that we are a big corporation. People saying that you are a rock star and you are, okay, I have a big corporation, and that when you think that you are a big corporation, I think that just the way down. So that was a big failure, and I think like we learned a little bit on the process.
We have a lot to share, but my first company, I used to run a social network in Brazil. It was the leader in its segment that I founded in 2008. It was a niche social network, and we had an average of 3-4 million monthly unique users by that time, but we didn't anticipate the movement of people from the desktop to the mobile. And when Instagram started operating in Brazil back in 2013, then we started losing users, and for us it was something very, very serious. And then when we got to the end of 2013, then the only option that we had by that time was to sell the company. So despite the fact that I sold the company, it was not for the best reasons behind it. So I consider this not a success history, but a failure.
That's interesting. Let me start with something in terms of a cultural behavior about how we in Mexico, and I wouldn't speak for Latin America, but at least for Mexico, how we perceive failure. No, it's because fail. The word itself comes from the same origin, fallar and failure. No, it's probably Latin, and but it has probably a different meaning. No, in Mexico we think failure as a terminal concept. So I mean, you are a failure, and that's it. No, probably in our culture, it's better to say you made mistakes. So when I speak to my employees, I will say you're allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to fail, because we perceive failure as a long-run issue. I mean, and we are looking for success, not for failure, because you don't build failure. I mean, you might. And that's like pampering the idea of failure. It's really bullshit for me. So you have to pamper the idea of success. Through the road, you will commit several mistakes. So I made thousands of mistakes, thousands. Many of those in which sector? Human resources, investments, etc., etc., etc. But the idea is, you have to create a culture within your company and even within yourself to be strong enough, anti-fragile, as I said, to take that volatility, those mistakes, and become stronger.
One of the things that Sebastian and I were talking about earlier today was this idea of separating the failure of an enterprise from a failure of a person, and how culturally there may be some barriers to that in Latin America versus in the U.S. Sebastian, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Oh, exactly, and we were speaking about this because I see that that's very different right now in Latin America to my experience here in the U.S. And that's for a reason. Companies in South America have been mainly run by families and by a single person who's making all the decisions of the company. And you attribute either success, failure, or mistakes to that person. But culturally, what has happened is that people on their day-to-day jobs have that make part of your team have not been accustomed to making decisions because they're afraid of making that mistake. And I think that's something that I try to push in my company, and I'm sure you guys all do, for people to make the mistake but learn, really. And that's something that I think all of you, including, we need to make sure that happens, because you build sustainable companies where you are able to diversify the decision making, and you're not building a sustainable company when you're in control of every single decision. And that's how you relate it.
We were discussing something here, because in Brazil you do not have the concept of limited liability company. If you fail, if your company fails, then you need to pay for everything that happens there. So it's very difficult to be an entrepreneur there. If you fail and if you weren't able to pay for the salary of your employees, you will need to sell your home to pay that. So it's a kind of, it's not only a culture difference, but it's also a regulatory kind of difference.
That actually brings me to my next set of questions, which I think it's fortuitous that we have 2 Mexicans and 2 Brazilians here, so we can talk about Mexico. Or excuse me, pardon me, 1 Colombian. I'm sorry, but you're living and working in Mexico. Yes.
Proud half Mexican.
Okay. Okay. Good. And in that sense, I mean, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the barriers and the opportunities that you see, both in a regulatory, entrepreneurial culture perspective in Mexico and Brazil. And let's start with Mexico. Are there things that you see that that over the years have improved in terms of both entrepreneurial culture, access to funds, venture capital, things like that? And can you talk about that?
I mean, I will say, first taking into consideration, it's we are a very segmented or stratified society. So the segments A and B of the whole population, it's only 6% of the whole country. That's almost nothing. So if you see the culture of entrepreneurship, I mean, we always talk about entrepreneurship of something like really easy, and you have to speak about it, and you will inspire someone. And again, I think that's bullshit. So you can change the life of those who already have a level of I don't know the right translation, but it's like a basis for reservation, no? Like that's self-sustainability that can give you your previous socioeconomic level. So if you're a middle-income guy or a higher-income guy, I mean, the possibilities that you might become an entrepreneur are higher than if you are in lower segments of the population.
Economic security, right?
Yeah, economic security. Yeah. I mean, and everyone is looking for that. I mean, you take chances, bottom up, limited environment, and taking into consideration what is the second choice that you will have once you probably fail. So I think in Mexico we've done a great job in terms to develop the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur ecosystem as a whole. Endeavor and many other organizations on the top of the pyramid. But we have a long way to go on the middle part of the pyramid, on the base of the pyramid. So when you talk to a guy who earns, I don't know, $5 a day, become an entrepreneur, okay. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you will get crazy with the answers you may have. So it's, I think there's a long way to go to permeate the whole culture through the whole population. But we have to grow as a country itself, and we have to move it from somewhere. And probably that will come from the tip of the pyramid.
Yeah, I mean, there is entrepreneurship. I mean, there's small business owners all throughout Segmentos, they, and all of that. But it's a very different type of entrepreneurship, right?
There's a huge discussion, at least within Endeavor, that I
right.
saw Linda just a few minutes ago. Is that an entrepreneur or
is it, yeah, exactly.
And something just to add, I think in Mexico, the government has played a huge role on promoting entrepreneurship also since I got there in 2013. So they have created like all these vehicles to sponsor VCs so that they can also like sponsor companies and invest. And I think this really has had like a great impact. We're seeing it's in the early days, definitely. Sometimes they have been sponsoring like funds and companies that probably don't deserve that money, but in a sense, what has happened is it created an ecosystem where people are already talking about entrepreneurship, are already talking about financing, are already talking about the whole challenges of starting your company. And I remember when I was in MIT, I also had the opportunity to do market research in Brazil. And I remember back in January 2012, when I went, I met a bunch of entrepreneurs. And at that point, there were many entrepreneurs who were also foreigners. And that is somewhat of the case of what we're seeing here in Mexico, my case included. But I'm sure right now, and I don't know the status, but I'm sure that right now the proportion of foreign entrepreneurs to Brazilian entrepreneurs is way less than back in 2012.
I remember that somebody told me a joke once that Startup Chile was Argentines that started their business in Chile and then went to Brazil to make the money afterwards.
That happened a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But so Flavio, do you want to shift a little bit to this discussion in Brazil and talk a little bit about what you see as the things that have changed over time, the things that could improve?
In terms of high impact entrepreneurship, we had a big cycle, B2C cycle between 2010 to 2013. And now we are starting a B2B cycle. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs. We do not have a lot of foreign entrepreneurs, just like if we compare to 2012, but we have a lot of entrepreneurs. But it is a fact that we are working with the top of the pyramid. At Cubo, we have 55 companies that were selected to be inside Cubo. To have those 55, we have talked with more than 750 companies. But the companies that we selected, and we say that we selected the best entrepreneurs, they went to the best universities, they worked at the best companies. The average age is 35 years old, so they already have some money to survive. They will not be hungry if they do not perform well. So it's we are transforming our local ecosystem, but we are working with the top of the pyramid, and this is a fact.
And João, if you could go back to when you started your business, when you started Urbano, and change something about the landscape in Brazil that would have made it easier to be successful, what would you have changed?
Actually, like in Brazil, we don't have a lot of government efforts. We do have a lot of private efforts regarding entrepreneurship. Like Itaú is one of, actually, I think it's the biggest one. Google having a very good initiative there as well. And if I could change a little bit the landscape, would be on education. Again, in my university, the best minds there wanted to work in a safe job for the government. They don't want to share that, create jobs, and I think would be on the education, but not just on the university, like from the very early education. I think we do have a lot of to change there.
Well, presumably it makes it difficult to hire, right? Hiring the right engineers, hiring the right product people, salespeople, and things like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the difficulties in building a business in country with the type of skill sets that you have and the types of the academic sets that you have to be able to actually get the right people at the right time in country. Is that an issue that you faced, or is that something that hasn't been as much of an issue?
Yeah, it's an issue, but it's your issue. It's not the market. It's like when I always talk to entrepreneurs about, what a difficult process is to hire people is because it's always difficult. Yeah. Here and in China and in the United States and whatever, it's always difficult. It's because it doesn't only depend on the technical abilities. It also depends on values. So you have to hire based on technicalities. That's the first probably questionnaire you have to fill out. But the second one is values, and to have that match, it's always difficult, no?
And I think that exactly. I think just as Heberto was saying, like it's gonna be difficult, and it's gonna be a risk that you have in your business, because if somebody comes in with and is not aligned to the values of the company, you're gonna have a problem. But I think you as an entrepreneur can take many measures to make sure that you mitigate those types of risks. And in our case, for example, we always are recruiting on the technology team. So what we have done is we have created like a very strong partnership with the Tec de Monterrey, based in Monterrey, which produces amazing talent in technology. And it acts as a feeder to our company, and really that's one of the ways that you can mitigate that risk of what you're saying, and you will find excellent talent. And not only that, but you're looking also for people that are willing to learn. That once they come into your company, you can develop them, and they can start learning different skills, because that's what's going to add value to the company.
We used to say that Brazilians are full of mimimi, cheios de mimimi. That means that they like to complain a lot. That it's difficult to hire, it's difficult to fire, that they need to pay a lot of taxes. But the fact is that every time that you have an entrepreneur that is creating a solution for a real world problem, and is creating a solution that can scale, they can succeed. At Cubo we have 55 companies, but from those 55, we have at least 30 or 40 that are really growing a lot in the past year. And I can say that the past year was very difficult for the country. And this happens everywhere. I think as entrepreneurs, we cannot be full of mimimi. We can just do what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree with Flavio. And one thing that we learn a lot, that it's very common that you say like hire people better than you. But people don't want to spend like 4-5 hours with those young kids, like to make them better than you. And that's something that we do. Like in Urbano, we used to have like all the C-level was a kind of what I call heroes, leader heroes, and that's not scalable. So today, like before, like I was spending like 80% of my time working wired, like a very focused, developing products, etc. And today, like I spend probably like 70-80% of my time talking with trainees, talking with interns, talking with like younger guys, and we do have like 2 cases in Urbano of undergrads that don't even finish university yet, and they are partners of the company. And so now we are spending a lot of time to make those guys better than us actually. And it's not something that you can hire them and they are ready. So the whole process is important.
One thing that doesn't, from a hiring and a recruitment perspective, one thing that doesn't escape my attention, and I'm sure a lot of people in here too, is that we're all men on this stage, do you feel like there's a particularly difficult problem in Latin America in recruiting women into this space, or do you think it's just reflective of the overall space worldwide?
Oh my God, that's a difficult question.
That's why I asked it.
No, that should be answered by a female participant.
Not necessarily.
Within a room.
I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
We do not have diversity at Cubo. We have 55 companies, just 3 companies founded by women. We do not have minorities, so it's a reflection of the society that we have.
And that's not, I mean, that was a little bit of, I mean, I think I knew the answer to that already, but I think people do think about this. I mean, we've done research at McKinsey that shows across the world it's an issue. I mean, the numbers are low. They're low in Silicon Valley, where you'd think they'd be a lot higher, where, you know, there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of boosters for women to participate. So,
which is also an opportunity, probably, because I don't know if you heard of a company called Victoria 140. Mm-hmm. Victoria 140 is a kind of endeavor for women in Mexico. So they have, I don't know, hundreds of companies founded by female founders. And it's been amazing what the access that this company are now having. I heard of another company in which they bring women from the lower segments of the population, and they teach for 6 months courses of programming. Right. And they bring it to the market, and some of them become entrepreneurs in the digital arena. So it's quite amazing. It's also an opportunity, either for women or for men. I mean,
yeah.
It's definitely it's self-explanatory, but it's a huge potential what is lying there.
In the B2C space, I mean, women often make home buying decisions, purchasing decisions, and you know, there's a huge opportunity to understand how they purchase too, from a business perspective, not just from a diversity perspective. So,
but it is a challenge. It's not something that is solved. We talk a lot about this issue, but it is still something that we need to work better on, for sure.
I want to ask one more question before we open it up to questions. And
sorry, I'm going to say something about my fund. I mean, yeah. Capital, we have a partner that is a woman. She's 43 years old. She was my partner in Metros Cúbicos, and she brings so much to the table. I mean, there is, when we want to play, I don't know, like this sort of a consulting experience or cross experience among companies, Hannah does the job, no? Mm-hmm. So, and we guys participate in other arenas of the whole thing. I mean, I want to say that it went like that. I mean, we didn't plan it; it just happened.
One more question is a little bit different, but from a competitive landscape perspective, you know, two of the folks on stage today have websites, or excuse me, have products that compete with international, you know, booking sites, or for instance, you know, apps like, you know, with instead of Reservamos, you could use Rome to Rio or something like that. How, not to plug them versus you, but how do you make sure, how do you differentiate your products from the international products that have a lot more scale? And how can you build products in Latin America that can scale internationally as well?
Yeah, so we're talking on the online travel sector, and the biggest player all around is a company that was created in Amsterdam, wasn't created in Silicon Valley. And I was in a panel some time ago in UFI, which is also a public university, and one of my friends, which is also an entrepreneur, said that we in Brazil, like he's saying that to undergrad students, we can't create nothing in Brazil new. We need to copy and see what people are doing in US, whatever. And I thought that was an absurd. Like this guy, he was talking with like a 22-year-old guys, and basically he's saying that the brains of the here or whatever is better than them. So I don't believe that. I do believe that we can create like global brands in Brazil. And also in Latin America, we have Mercado Libre, which is one of the most successful company outside US, like a $10 billion US dollars market cap. Companies 100% Argentinian. And regarding the differentiation, like code and technology is like obsolete. And if you have a culture that improving your team to always like create and deploy something better, like I will never be so behind. And also like of course you do need to use your local knowledge. That's something that born for you. Like I'm Brazilian, I know what Brazilians local look like. Regarding expansion, I think that that's another Brazilian culture that I think is not so good. Like if you be a successful company in Brazil, like that's enough. Like I don't think, I think we can create companies like Mercado Libre, like Despegar, that go overseas. And on technology, like I think it's the easiest way to do that. Like probably on Q4 of this year, we're gonna start our international expansion. Again, it's gonna be a big challenge, but I do believe that we can do that.
And I think to add something that I really think is in our space in travel, definitely barriers to entry are low, and you can create a really great product and a really great brand by two ways. No, one, having excess cash and investing that excess cash and creating and building the brand that way, which is not the case for many of us. And the other is to have better understanding of your customer than your competitor. And I think really you need to have like a very data oriented company where you're like getting that feedback all the time and then adjusting your product and your service accordingly. And I really think that's the way we have done it. In our case, we have specialized on a segment of the population that is not being addressed right now by Despegar and by other companies in the travel sector, and that is the person who is in the base of the pyramid that has been more accustomed to traveling by bus. Yeah. And that's our differentiation.
Sorry, I have a good example. This company here, TFG. Nobody know this company. It's one of my best friends' companies, also brothers. They found the company in 2011, and it's a Brazilian company. It's the second biggest game company in the Occident. Like they have 600 million users. The biggest one is EA, Electronic Arts. And these guys, they are the second biggest company with 600 million active users. And they are in São Paulo. I think they don't have any. Now they have one engineering that's not Brazilian. And like on this segment, like not everyone know them, but they are a case.
So let's go to questions. I see quite a few up here. The first one is, a lot of MBAs, a lot of people in the room obviously don't have a tech background. How can they pursue a startup career and add value to their venture?
I'll take that one. To tell you the truth, I didn't have much of a tech background either, other than I went to two very technical universities. But my background really was in industrial engineering. How we resolved that, really, I have two co-founders more. One is in the finance part, and Adrian, who is actually the CTO of the company, runs all the technology team. Definitely along the way, you need, like, you're involved in the company, and you're running a technology company, and you need to learn about it. You need to develop the skills on how to hire the best talent in the technology teams. You need to learn the skills on how to motivate people that are in the technology side. And that's related, but definitely my job is not to sit down and code. And I think that's how we do it.
It's something, underlying the question is, what happens if I have something, a weakness in terms of knowledge, and how I can compensate it in order to launch a company? That's the underlying question. And I will say, we as a fund, Capital Invent, we do not invest in entrepreneurs. We invest in entrepreneur teams. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we've learned for the last 4 years is one entrepreneur is not enough. So we have invested in our pattern of growth. If we compare the most successful companies in our portfolio, the most successful are those which have a very solid, compatible, value share entrepreneurs. Yeah.
But I talk with a lot of MBA or students or graduates that want to open a technology-based startup without a technology co-founder. And 100% of the cases that I know, they failed because they if technology is the core of what you are doing, you need to have someone in the founding team that it's going to have the same kind of passion that you are putting in the business to make it happen. So it's just a hint to anyone that is thinking about that.
It's interesting also because a startup, starting a venture doesn't necessarily require an MBA, right? So you might want to think about whether or not you're going into it for the right reasons, or because it's interesting, or because it's popular. And I think Linda talked about that a little bit too. And I'm sure you've all seen that before. Yeah. Next question. So it's scary to start a new business. It definitely is, and it requires a level of commitment and of taking a leap of faith that not everybody is prepared to take. I think João, you talked a little bit about why you started your business. Does anybody else want to add sort of what triggered you to start what you were doing?
Oh, for me, I think I shared a little bit about the story, but I was actually spending time in Mexico. Took time as well during those months of my internship to travel, and what I realized is everybody was booking all the bus tickets at the bus terminals, and while I was at MIT in Boston, I would come here to New York very often and would book my Bolt bus or my Benga bus. I'm sure you have done it. My wife was living here at the moment, and I said we need to provide a better solution than what there exists today, yeah. And that was kind of the motivation and our initial thesis, and that thesis has changed over time, but that was our real background.
I love the next question. This is for you, Heberto.
I'm going to answer this.
Go ahead. You can answer this too, but then I'm going to get back to you.
Who studies an MBA? Who works in McKinsey? Insecure overachievers. Think about it. So
it's on our logo. You look closely.
Yeah. And if you're an insecure overachiever, the best way to start is just have a starting date. Yeah. That's it. And then reevaluate your commitment to the project every 2 years, and that's it.
Don't overthink.
Don't think too much.
So apparently you're building the Mexican tech crunch. That's what the question is. Really? Heberto, yes. Well, number one, are you? Number two, ¿cómo se llama?
No, one of the things that in ours, probably that's come from one of my friends here. And in our second fund, the first fund that we launched, it is a very small fund. No, it allows to invest in seed capital rounds and follow on in a couple of companies. And now we have to we are pretending to grow to a larger venture capital fund with expertise in Series A. So, and one of the idea that moved me to go from one fund to the other one, larger one, was not to think about the fund itself, but to consider the fund as a new endeavor or as a new company. So when we decided this, our we consider the fund as a vehicle to invest, but not the definite and the only idea. So we want to try is to change the whole Mexican entrepreneurial ecosystem, bring it from the top of the pyramid to the base of the pyramid. And one of the ideas that we have is to create a whole set of ideas to create education about entrepreneurship in different segments of the pyramid. So we consider the fund only as a vehicle, and we are going to invest in the vehicle, but definitely our commitment to our society is much more than only to invest in a couple of companies and that's it. So, I mean, at least for me, that's a little bit boring. I mean, just to decide to invest, once you are an entrepreneur and you see operation and you see, I mean, how freaks your life forever, no? Somehow it's it makes you somehow paranoid, schizophrenic, and you want to participate in everything. But really, when you invest in a company, I mean, you have to trust the entrepreneur. So, it's mostly we as funds. I mean, our main job is to select the right partners, and that's it. And then is the job of the partner just to follow on. And but then, I mean, what remains from the whole fund? So we want to bring the whole idea to a larger level.
I'm going a little bit rogue here because I can actually see the questions that aren't on the screen up there like you all can. What's the most extreme or crazy thing you've ever done to land an investor or an investment? I like that question.
What is the most crazy thing to what?
To land an investor or an investment, to basically to get an investment. No crazy things. So it's the audience is over dramatizing the process. Is what basically.
So what were you expecting? I sold my body once or something like that. Like
I think because I started it up with Shark Tank, you know, they wanted to have something a little bit more more exotic and exciting. Okay, we'll move on then. Fine, this is not working. One of the other questions on here that I really like is, you know, does government sponsorship, say like a Startup Chile or, you know, the government-backed accelerators, things like that, do they have a noticeable impact on the market? If they do, how do they do that? And if they don't, how should they be directing their resources?
Not in Brazil. The government is very slow. They can inspire new entrepreneurs, but the program that they run, at least there in Brazil, didn't have a very good impact on entrepreneurship in general. So we are discussing right now with the government that they should focus their resources on helping take rid of the bureaucracies to open a company or to close a company, to hire an employee, to fire an employee. So this will definitely make a bigger impact on entrepreneurship in the country than trying to finance new companies. That will definitely fail, most of them.
The infamous Custo Brasil, right?
Exactly.
Right. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have some, cross feelings about the whole idea of the government participation with the private sector, and but I saw something just a couple of days ago. I saw Eric Archer from Brazil. He's from Monaxis, one of the largest VC funds in Brazil, and he told me, we asked him how difficult it was for you just to raise your second, third, whatever. He's probably now in his seventh fund, sixth or seventh, I don't know, whatever. It's quite amazing. And he told me, we were pretty lucky because we didn't have to look. The international investors came to us because of the Brazilian moment. So for us, it was pretty simple. In Mexico, that didn't happen. Well, we didn't have that. So we had a huge market of potential entrepreneurs with no funding for entrepreneurs. And that lagging has been there for the last 10 years. But 5 years ago, the government launched an initiative in which they put the money in sharing risks with private funds.
Is the Instituto del Emprendedor? Or?
INADEM, yeah.
INADEM.
So that somehow internalizes the risk within the within funds. They have funded more or less 40 or 50 early VCs in Mexico. And now that's bringing, that brought a lot of stamina to the whole ecosystem in Mexico. And now, the challenge is that among those 50 funds that who will survive, who will prevail, and what is the next step? But that belongs to the, that lies on the private interest. and not necessarily that. So one of the things that I always speak with the people from INADEM is like there is always a right time to start, but the most difficult question for the government is when to stop. So and I always tell them as a way to joke with them is when are you closing INADEM? When are you shutting down INADEM? No, so it's.
And I think you as an entrepreneur, you can never rely on the government to solve anything for you. No, it will never happen, really. So I in terms of the funding, yeah, they did contribute to the Mexican ecosystem because it gave it a start. But if you're looking for funding, you need to open your options as well and look internationally, look locally, look wherever you can. And I think that's going to be one of the most important things. From what I also have mixed feelings in the sense that right now in Mexico, there's a lot of funds that can invest in the seed stage, but you have a very big gap in terms of a round that goes above $5 million and up to $10 million. There's not many funds that are playing in that sector because after the $10 million ticket, you have a more private equity type of funds. And I think that should start to evolve and that will start to change as Heberto was saying, like he's looking to raise a new fund that is larger and that will allow him to make larger investments.
We're on our last question now. Unfortunately, this has been really great. Thank you all for taking the time to do this. I'm going to combine a few of the ones that are up here. I like the what's the next big thing question, but I want to direct it a little bit because it's a very broad question. What's the next? If I were an entrepreneur looking to say in this group I wanted to go back to, I was from Mexico or I was from Colombia or I was from Brazil and I want to go back home and I want to start a business in an industry. What are the opportunities? What are the underserved opportunities you're seeing in both Mexico and in Brazil for an entrepreneur to address? And why aren't you doing it yourself?
I have a bias, and I'm going to do it sooner or later. But everything that is related to the government, it's an opportunity. Health sector, education, financing the lower part of the pyramid. So everything related to potential gaps in the market, which had to be solved in some other countries by the government, and at least in Mexico, that's not going to happen. So it's a huge opportunity. Health sector, education, I see opportunities very promising for great ideas and great entrepreneurs.
Flavio?
In the 2000, we had a lot of people migrating from the base of the pyramid to the middle class. So we had a lot of B2C companies between 2010, 2013. That's when Hotel Urbano and other companies were founded. And with the crisis in Brazil, most of the big companies, they are looking to improve their processes. They are looking for efficiencies. So we are starting a huge cycle for B2B solutions. And this is a great opportunity that we have in the country. It's exactly the question that was there. If the crisis creates an opportunity, or if it is a threat. So it's definitely an opportunity for companies there.
And businesses from outside don't entirely realize how big of a market Brazil is. They really don't. When they come from Europe and the United States, and even Mexico too, they underestimate the size of it.
Exactly.
Sebastian, João, any thoughts?
Actually, next big thing in Brazil, to be very honest, I don't know. I think, otherwise I will do. I have a good team and we love to code, and I think it will be probably a black swan. And when that's happened, everyone will say, I thought that would happen, but I don't know actually. The big thing, I know like a lot of opportunities, but the next big thing, I don't know.
The idea of marketplaces or digital marketplaces is so hot in Latin America now that if you have a marketplace of caipirinhas, it will probably get funded.
That could be
That's our business later tonight at the party. Don't take away from our business. Nothing to add, Sebastian? Go ahead.
I agree with Heberto in a sense that I see a lot of opportunity in the education sector. But for me right now, really, and for us, it's to grow our business, and we're really focused on growing our business. So that's what we're thinking on.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody.